Fixez.com bringing you another repair video today. Looks like we're going to be working on the HTC One M8. In today's video, we're going to show you the steps necessary to remove and replace the display assembly on your M8. Before we get started with our disassemble, let's review our suggested tools. Small Phillips screwdriver, a spudger, fine-tipped curved tweezers, a heat gun or a blow dryer, T5 Torx screwdriver, SIM card ejection tool, precision knife set. Taking a look here at our M8, before we start any part of the disassemble, let's go ahead and power down the unit. We're going to look to begin our entry by removing the top and bottom grills on either side of the display assembly. We're going to begin first with our heat gun or blow dryer, applying a small amount of heat to soften up the adhesive to make peeling up these grills a little easier. You'll see we used a precision knife kit to begin the separation of our grills. The seams on the M8 are very tight, so we prefer to use the thinnest edge possible to begin our separation of these grills as to not mar up the sides of our outside framework. When peeling these up, we did try to cause as little damage as possible. But do keep in mind, you will receive another set of replacement grills along with your new display assembly. We've got a series of 6 screws that's going to be securing the display assembly down. It's a combination of 2 small Phillips screws and T5 Torx bit screws for the other 4. If you haven't done so already, you can remove the SIM card tray as well as the micro SD card tray from the sides of the phone using a SIM card removal tool or a paper clip. Very similar to the grills on the front of our phone, we have very tight seams on our M8. We found it easiest and caused the least amount of damage using a precision knife kit to pop free the clips. You'll see we freed a few on each side of the phone before finally taking a firm grip of the display assembly and peeling away the back housing. Be sure to keep track of that power button for our reassembly later. Once into our internals, you're going to recognize the majority of our connections is covered up with protective tape. Let's remove that tape by using a little bit of heat from our heat gun or blow dryer to soften it up, making it easier to peel back and not cause damage to our ribbon cables. Let's now start getting after some of these connections. Let's first start with the 2 coaxial cable connections on this side of the motherboard by simply popping them free. Below them is the terminal for our battery that's secured with 2 small Phillips screws. Let's remove those screws and then pop free our connection. We've also got 2 coaxial cable connections on the other side of the motherboard that we want to release. The rest of our connections are locking sockets that we want to flip up to release before sliding the ribbon cables out. Let's not forget our coaxial cable connection here in the corner. And then now we can go through and back out all of our ribbon cables from our locking sockets. Keep in mind, this connection here has our volume buttons adhered to the side of the phone. You'll see that we used a small amount of heat so that we could peel up that volume button before completely backing out the ribbon cable from its socket. Let's be careful as we slide the rest of our ribbon cables safely out of their sockets. We've got 3 T5 Torx bit screws securing this top board down. Let's go ahead and back those screws out, and then it should release this top board for complete removal. We've got this plastic cover that we need to remove that's just above the rear-facing camera. And now let's release some of our connections, starting here first with the front-facing camera. A connection here for our display assembly, one more here on the other side of the display assembly, and then we also have a small plug here for the vibration motor. Be careful with this one when you're backing it out, as it is slightly delicate. The vibration motor should pick right up out of its housing. We can now slide the ribbon cables out from either side for our display assembly. We've got 4 small securing Phillips screws, one on either corner of this portion of our board. Let's back those out. Let's not forget to peel up our proximity sensor in the top of the phone. You'll see here we used a little bit of heat to soften up the adhesive to make peeling it back a little easier. We've got a final screw securing this portion of our board down, hiding here under our rear-facing camera. Let's back that screw out, and our board should be free for complete removal. Let's continue on by removing our front-facing camera. Our earpiece speaker is sitting nicely in its housing. We can peel it up now. Our loudspeaker is going to be next. We'll again use a little bit of heat to soften it up, and then we'll use our tweezers to gently peel it up from its location. Our dock port assembly should peel up just as easily. We'll use a plastic spudger here as to try to not cause damage to the bottom side of our assembly. With the dock port out of our way, the battery in the center of the phone is going to be last. It is held down with quite a bit of adhesive. We recommend that you take your time, use plenty of heat and a plastic spudger. With a little bit of patience, you'll finally be able to maneuver the battery away from the phone. At this point, we're going to bring in our replacement part so that we can compare it to our existing display assembly. As you'll notice, front to back, they're identical to each other. What we'll be doing is transplanting all the parts that we just removed from our existing display over to our replacement. Here's those extra grills that we mentioned earlier in the video for our reassembly. Let's now begin the reassembly of our M8. You'll notice that we're actually going to be using our existing display because when we first disassembled the phone, it wasn't broken. Let's start first here with our battery and make sure that we align the terminal on the proper side of the phone. You'll see we softened up our existing adhesive here with a little bit of heat before setting it in place. Our next piece into the bottom of the phone is going to be our dock port assembly. You can press it firmly into the securing adhesive, and we even used a little bit of heat to soften it up first. Next, we bring in our loudspeaker over top of the dock port, and then we'll flip our phone over to bring our attention to the top portion of it. We're going to bring in our replacement part so we can show you that it has adhesive pre-installed already. We're using our existing display, so we're going to heat up the majority of our existing adhesive to get things to settle in nicely. The first piece back into the top of our phone is going to be our loudspeaker, followed by our front-facing camera into its housing. We've got that bottom board that we're going to maneuver back into place, but let's check that connections down on the bottom for our rear-facing camera to make sure it's secure. Let's maneuver the board around the connection for our front-facing camera. And once in place, we can secure the connection for our camera and then bolt down the securing screw that's right below the rear-facing camera. We can now reinstall the 4 securing screws, one on each corner of the board. Next, we secure our proximity sensor into the top of the phone with the remaining adhesive. With the sensor secured in its location, we can now bring our attention to the ribbon wires on each side of the board. Sliding them into their locking sockets, and then flipping the lock down, securing the connection. We can now push the vibration motor back down into its housing and connect the small plug into the board. Time to maneuver the top board back down into its location. With the mounting screws aligned, we can bring in the 3 Torx screws to secure it down into place. Once the board's locked down with its screws, let's begin reinstalling all of our ribbon connections. Sliding the ribbon cables in, locking the sockets, and securing that connection. Continue that same pattern with all of our locking sockets all the way around this top board. When you get to a coaxial connection like the one here in the corner, it's just simply putting it onto the socket and pressing firmly down to secure its connection. Take your time, Make sure all of these connections are very secure, as you want to make sure the phone fully functions upon power up. Bringing our attention to the other side of the board now. Again, repeating the same pattern as we did on the other side. Slide in, lock down, fully secured. Here's our battery terminal connection that we can press firmly down to secure it onto the board. And we can settle down our two coaxial cable connections here on this side as well. Our tiny ribbon connection for the dock port. And the two Phillips screws that secure the battery terminal down. We are now going to position our protective tape over top of our secured connections. Let's make sure that our adhesive for our volume buttons on the side of the phone is holding it securely in place. Let's not forget our final two coaxial cable connections for the top board. We can finally set in the plastic cover over top of the smaller board. Bringing in the rear cover for reinstallation along with the power button. Be patient with the power button and work slowly to try to keep it in its housing as you made it back down with the display assembly. Once you have the first of a couple of the clips secured, then you can begin to work around the perimeter of the phone, securing it down into place. Once the display is flush all the way around the perimeter of the phone, we're in the home stretch. Let's bring in the 6 securing screws, the 2 Phillips in the top portion of the phone, and the 4 Torx screws down on the bottom. We're going to reinstall our existing grills, so we're going to use a small amount of heat to soften up the adhesive for their reinstallation. Position them down and press firmly into place. We can now reinstall the micro SD and SIM card trays and power the phone on to check for full functionality. And there you have it, another successful repair by Fixez.com. All of the parts and tools you've seen today in this video are available at www.fixez.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter.